Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on driving institutional change for university social responsibility. Very welcome to everyone. My name is Andrea Bandelli. I'm Head of International Relations at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam of EU Amsterdam. It is my pleasure to chair this session where we will hear some very broad set of contributions on how universities and academic institutions are really tackling university social responsibility and creating institutional change to support this fundamental role of the university. We'll have presentations of about 15 minutes, followed by Q&A. Please feel free to use the chat box on the right side of the screen to ask questions to the speakers. If your question is directed to a specific speaker, please mention that in your question. And at any time also after the session, you can contact the speakers in the on the platform. There is a section on networking where you can find all contact possibilities. We'll have about, as I said, about 15 minutes. I will be the timekeeper for this. I also ask the presenters before they do the presentation to introduce themselves. So if they can do that in a few minutes, that would be great. I would say let's start with the first presentation, which is titled USRN Members' Diverse Response to COVID-19, Diversity and Trends Beyond Academia by Fernando Palacio and Paola Sanoni.
Okay, I don't know if I am being seen and if my slides are being seen. I am looking at my own PowerPoint and I am not sure if it is being shown.
We can see you.
Okay, you see me and you see the slides. Okay, well, by now you would imagine that we're all used to this technology, but obviously there's still a challenge. There's obviously something still to be learned from all this. So first of all, thank you very much to the chair, Andrea, for the introduction. Like you said, my name is Fernando Palacio, and I will be presenting this basically together with my colleague Paola Sanoni from Kyoto University. We did this work together, and I would like to, before getting started, give a big thanks to the University Social Responsibility Network, because I've been working with the network for a while, and the work that the network and the members do is really, really inspiring. So because of that inspiration, this work draws out of that experience and that inspiration. And what I will be mentioning or sharing here is the experience that we had on how the USRN members created and had a different response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, thank you. Why am I not sharing this? Hold on a second. Screen, PowerPoint, and how about now? Is it there now? Okay, sorry. So I apologize for that. Like I said, some difficulties. We would imagine that they're ready, but they're still ongoing. So this is my first slide, and the name of the presentation is USRN Members' Diverse Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic and the Diversity and Trends Beyond Academia. So this is the introduction of myself and Dr. Paola Sanoni, with whom we did this together. And so just to give you a little bit of a background to the paper that we wrote, has to do with the first thing is the MOOC that the USR network created a couple of years ago. Before the pandemic started, the USR network decided to create a MOOC to introduce what USR is. So at the beginning of the MOOC, there were 13 members of the network sharing their experiences about what they were doing about USR. So initially, we created a plan that was 4 sessions that would include theory and practice of what USR is. So this basically shows the structure of that program. Eventually, as we were producing the MOOC, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, so we decided to add a special session to the MOOC that talks about the response from the universities. So this last square is what we added at the, like in the middle of the way, in the middle of the production of the MOOC. So this is the structure of the special session on response to COVID-19. We had a small introduction on what COVID was. The University of New South Wales presented a more in-depth perspective because of the specialization of the person in charge there. Then we had the response from the USRN network as a whole, and then the USR individual members. So this is what our paper is looking at, what the individuals members did in order to address the pandemic. And here is a QR code if you want to have direct access to the MOOC. So thanks, Paola, for the QR. And so now we're going to go into details of what we did and how we did it. So the first thing is, when we were creating this MOOC, we had each university would share with us the narratives of what they were doing. So each university shared with us a number of videos and a number of texts and a number of resources that described what they were doing in order to address the pandemic. So this shows like there were initially 13, and then there were 4 more members who shared their stories. So we had the text telling us what they were doing. So what this text basically did, what we found is that there were blocks of issues. So these blocks could be, for example, some universities were doing more research, some universities were doing more education, more outreach, and so on and so forth. So we found blocks of engagement where the universities were acting to respond to the pandemic. So as this moved on, as we could see these blocks emerging from their narratives, what we could see is that there were areas and dimensions of engagement that were different. So we basically found that there were different areas. But then within these areas, we started finding items or issues that we could count, that we could actually see, like this university is doing this many issues regarding outreach, or this university is doing this many issues regarding research, and so on. So we could kind of identify quantitatively the amount of work that each university was doing. So one of the interesting things was that in the narratives, we found a total of 751 items describing different actions. So that gave us a very good insight to how this diversity of actions was actually happening. So from here, the first thing that we found was like, okay, we have 13 universities representing 5 continents, so we have global representation. So that was a very interesting thing, like universities all around the world were actually working to address the needs of the pandemic. The second more important thing that we found out was that each institution was addressing their local needs, and they were setting their priorities based on those local needs. So there was a direct correlation between the strategy for USR as compared to the local needs. The next thing that we could see from these narratives was that the kind of USR initiatives were different. There were very clear academic contributions, and there were very clear non-academic contributions, but eventually we were able to split them. So from here, from this diversity, we found out that there are at least 8 areas of engagement in regards to how the universities were addressing the pandemic. And these basic areas that we found refer to research, education, outreach, advisory role, institutional reforms, information management, provision of support, and extended services. So all these different areas of activities were actually happening at the same time, but with different areas of priority, depending on each university and the local needs. No, so basically this is what we saw. Like there's dimensions and areas of engagement. The next thing that we found was regarding to the trends. Once we started breaking the blocks and looking at what was inside each of the blocks, like I said before, based on the items, we started seeing dimensions. So for example, when it was about research, we could see that there were at least 3 different dimensions of research that was being done. So for example, one was related to health, one was related to socioeconomic impact of the pandemic, and the environmental impact of the pandemic. So these different dimensions were coming out from the narratives of each university. So from here, one of the things that we could see is that each university was specializing their forte into what they do best. The second thing that we could see from here is where universities are allocating their resources. So you can, as universities specialize on what they do best, they put their resources there. So that was very clear, like it became very evident. The next thing that we could see here was a new kind of mindset. And this mindset had to do with the fact that the pandemic had to be addressed in a comprehensive way. Universities engaged with society in a way that was much, much wider than just research and education. So there was much more of a comprehensive engagement. And one important thing that came up, especially from universities in the network that have hospitals, is that the engagement of these hospitals was very transversal. University hospitals were contributing to society in much more than just providing health. They were actually providing contributions that relate to all 8 areas of engagement. So that was a big discovery for us. Then the next thing that I would like to note or to make this presentation about is the fact that from the 8 areas of engagement that we found, only 2 refer to academic kind of engagements, so basically research and education, whereas the 6 remaining areas of engagement do not necessarily relate to academic work. And this gives us a very strong hint about what I said before on the mindset. There is a level of engagement that is far beyond academic work. And this was something that comes from the stories of the universities themselves. So the next thing that the first thing that comes in mind is that from the counting of our items, you may remember what I said in one of the previous slides, we had the narratives, and from the narratives, the blogs, and from the blogs, we have items that were accountable. We could count how many times each university mentioned one or other form of engagement. And surprisingly, as you can see here, only 30-something% was academic, whereas the 60-90% extra was non-academic form of engagement. So this is the distribution of our results. You can see, for example, that research, we counted 182 items, which constitute 24% of all the contributions university did, which tells us something about the level of engagement universities have with research in the network. But if you see, the next big contribution came in outreach, which is 138 items. So that tells us something about contributions that are not necessarily academic. When we put the whole contribution into a charter that shows us how much each area of engagement provides, in the 100%, only the green parts show academic contribution. So research was only 24% and education was 7%. So these 2 green areas show what people normally think about what USR is. But our point here is that the beige areas, meaning support, outreach, information reforms, and other services and advisory role, these are not considered academic contributions, and yet they made up to about 70% of the contributions universities made. So from here, the conclusions that we could draw, some general observations that we have are kind of predictable, is that USR permeates all aspects of life of universities. So USR is not only for academic issues. USR happens in all of the university life. The second general thing that we found has to do with the fact that engaged universities reduce risk, manage crisis, and offer safer environments because they are more connected with the reality of their campuses and the society around them. They can provide for this framework to reduce risk. Another important finding that we found is that universities become a part of the solution to the COVID-19 crisis. Of course, COVID-19 was a huge disaster, and nobody can deny the level of the impact that the epidemic had. However, this also gave universities an opportunity to be a part of the solution. They created activities and engagements that were, bringing solutions to the different problems in their local situations. Another clear outcome from this is that although universities have a shared sense of responsibility, this is unique to each university, and this relates to their vision and their locale, the place where they work. So although universities share this need to give back, each university will do it in its own way. Now, we have two key findings. This was very unique to our study. The first thing was that USR is diverse. So like I said before, we found 8 academic and non-academic areas of engagement with different dimensions within each area. So that produced different levels of impact. So here my emphasis goes on the fact that universities contribute to society far beyond academic contribution. So USR has a much wider impact and relevance than just what universities teach and research about. And the second key funding that we have, this relates to how we did our project, how Paola and I produced this research paper, which has to do with the framework. You may remember in the methodology how we brought the idea from the narratives into blocks and the blocks into items, and how we counted the items and we separated the different areas. Based on this idea, what came up was a new framework of analysis that helps us to identify areas of response and priorities based on the allocation of efforts. So based on our framework, what we can see is that universities can have not only different priorities, and we can see where those priorities go, but we can also help universities find their own priorities and enhance the way they engage with society. So these two findings were particularly unique to our research paper with Paola. So this is all from me. I hope that this is comprehensive enough and clear enough. I've gone through trying to be quick, but this is all. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fernando. Very, very interesting presentation. Do we have one from Paola as well? Because we could take the questions after both presentations, or should we do that now?
If it is okay with you, I would prefer to do it now because I need to go chair another session right after.
Oh,
so
okay.
If there are any questions later, Paola may jump in, but if we have questions for now, I would rather address them now, if you're okay with that.
Okay. No, that's good. Let's see. If there are any questions, please put them on the box on the right side. I have actually two quick ones, if you want. One is, did you find any major differences in terms indeed of how universities approach their responsibility? You mentioned that indeed there are differences at the local level. Can you maybe give a few examples of things that stood out?
Sure. There were many differences. Like I said, one of the general findings that it's not that we found something new, but we definitely corroborate that USR is both global and local. There were many examples, like just to give you, because the Hong Kong Polytechnic is being the host, not only of the summit, but also of the network. Hong Kong Polytechnic provided a lot of information regarding, for example, how they did service learning. Service learning is something that usually you will have the students going into the community and actually engaging directly. But when the pandemic hit, how do you bring that idea of engagement from home? And the Hong Kong Polytechnic University did a very good example in creating a project that it's the Serve for Communities. I can't remember the exact name, but basically what they did was creating a program that would allow students to engage from their home with situations happening, for example, in the northern parts of Thailand. So that was a very clear example of one university addressing a global problem from their forte. Other examples would be, I don't know, for example, the University of Kyoto provided a lot of information regarding the work of the hospital. The level of engagement that the hospital of Kyoto University had was much more than just taking care of patients. It had to do with producing all the research, enhancing the research for the vaccines. Other universities like Sao Paulo also provided information regarding the vaccines. So clearly, each university had their own forte and their own relation to the local needs and how they address them. So yes, that's a...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And maybe another one, do you plan to apply this framework for a follow-up research, or do you have plans to...
Yeah, well, with Paola, we have been talking about this. Like, it's definitely an interesting thing because it's new. We haven't seen anything like this before. And there is always an issue of what is university social responsibility. And at least here in Japan, there is always the debate of responsibility seen as the accountability side, not from the proactive engagement side. So this new framework definitely allows universities to reconsider how they can engage with society beyond academia. Mm-hmm. So for the time being, we are focusing on having this first article published soon. And we do have some ideas for follow-ups, but we haven't nailed it yet to what this will be. But it's coming. I think it's coming soon. As we would say, in Japanese, we would say Paola yoroshiku, which means stay with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for your contributions. I think we can move to the next presentation then. Thank you so much, Fernando and Paola. So the next presentation is from Ivar Maas from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and his presentation is titled Reflections on Transformative Change Towards Sustainability in Universities.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrea, and very pleased to be here also today. So my name is Ivar Maas. I am the lead sustainability of VU and therefore responsible for the sustainability strategy. And I'm also a PhD candidate on the topic that you see on the screen right now. For today, well, first I would like to give a broad introduction, also an introduction to VU University. And then I will tell something briefly about sustainable universities, and then about transformative change. And then, well, there's a closing and some room for discussion. So that's the program for now. So first, very briefly, what is then VU Amsterdam? Because this is our first conference that we are part of, and the first time that we are part of this network. So we are very happy to be there. So this is also the stage or the moment to introduce VU to the network. So we are a Dutch university based in Amsterdam. We have around 30,000 students and 5,000 staff, and we have 9 faculties. Our, let's say, values are that we have scientific and value-driven education and research. We intend to be free thinking with an expertise on a broader mind, and we work together to build a better world for people and planet. So that's super brief what the VU as a whole stands for. Specifically for sustainability, well, this is the VU's strategy, and in the core of it, you see sustainable, which means that it's a priority area, and we want to integrate sustainability in all of our operations, and also therefore be a social responsible university. And we define sustainability along the lines of the Sustainable Development Goals. Then very briefly, well, what that specifically means for example, education and some of our flagship projects and aims there. For education, we have the Sustainability Leadership Hub, which intends to educate teachers on educating sustainability for our students. Then we have a research network for sustainability, which links different researchers from all over the university to work on sustainability issues. Concerning knowledge transfer, we have a museum and a workplace for the Anthropocene called Sapiens. And there we hope to connect local stakeholders and researchers and young professionals to tackle the big questions of the Anthropocene. And finally, then concerning the organization, we intend to make a climate positive campus and align our operations with the Sustainable Development Goals also. And in the center, you now see the Green Office. So we also have a student platform where our students engage in also pushing the institution to be more sustainable and to engage in it. So that's very, very quickly sustainability and at VU and VU what it is overall. So then maybe it begs also the question, so what is a sustainable university actually? And also, yeah, how does that then link to driving change for universities for societal responsibility? So what I intend to do in this talk is give a reflection on what then transformative change towards sustainability can be, based on now the research I'm doing for my PhD. And I think the central thing here is that universities, or we have to learn from each other how we can drive our institutions towards societal responsibility. And we will now dive into that more deeply. Because, well, there is great need for quick change. So this is Antonio Guterres on the COP that's saying, well, we are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. And well, we need to make changes for sustainability all over society, and universities play a crucial role in that. So what is then a sustainable university? Well, that depends a bit. We have seen 3 waves of how sustainability became more and more a part of universities. In the first wave during the 70s, we saw a first surge where sustainability became or was pushed to be a part of education and research. Then around the zeros, we saw that the focus shifted mainly on operations. So CO2 reduction, waste reduction, stuff like that. So the operational side of it all. And starting from around 2010, late 2010, we see a more and more holistic approach. And soon we will see what that then entails a bit more. But this is then, let's say, more or less the classical way where you see just very, very broadly all the different aspects of what a sustainable university can be. So, well, in the center, it's sustainable university, and that atones to then campus and campus family, so the wider campus area. Then on the right of that, you have the community and the wider world. And on top, the academic approach, which is then indeed research and education. What you see in this model compared to, let's say, more holistic models is that it's mostly aimed at how then, or let's say, what changes we need to make. And if we go to now a more or less holistic approach, then we see something else, namely that this holistic approach to sustainability is quite different than the approach that you saw before, like a gigantic overview of all the different aspects of what a sustainable university is. Now in this holistic approach, we are more looking at how then this, how a sustainable university should look. So there are 2 main differences, and that is with this whole institution approach, it incorporates a wider scope of what sustainability can be. So it also includes then environmental, but also social and economic foundations. So also there's a shift on that. And also it does not only look at what I already said, what kind of actions need to be taken, but also how they need to be enacted and what it means for the institution. And that can then also that also means that this that the change that you ask, if you talk about how a change should occur, that it's also very much location specific, what kind of things need to change. And I think we also heard that in the previous presentation, that how you address those issues can be very local. And that's also what we see concerning sustainability and how organizations navigate towards sustainability, is that it can be quite different, and it can be quite dependent on how the cultural or political or the governance structure of a university already is. And in making that change, in defining how you as an institution, or how an institution could be more sustainable, it really depends on that local issue. And in a way, it also asks not only for a direct and, let's say, a clear stopping point, a clear direction where you always have to go, or where you know where you have to go, because if you ask the question how, it's not always clear beforehand. And that's something different than what we see when you, I don't know, you want to put solar panels on a roof somewhere. Okay, that can be quite relatively straightforward. But identifying, for example, for what it means to be a teacher in a sustainable university, that's a different story, where you're not always already sure what the outcome can be. And this requires also institutions to be learning, and to not only set, let's say, steps forward, but also step backwards. And the interesting thing about universities is that, well, however, higher education institutions, being institutions of learning, we often are not always that well able to create this internal structure in which we are able to do this institutional learning. So that is, I think, the big question, or the big challenge for us. How can we make, or how can we create a situation in which we foster this institutional learning, in moving this whole institution in an holistic way towards sustainability? And one of the ways, or one of the deeper ways in which that change can happen, is then the change of transformative change. So let's briefly dive into that, what then transformative change is. You have roughly, or you have several types of change, organizational change. One of the other ones is then transactional change, which follows a quite classical plan, do, check, act sequence of how you approach a problem, or how you approach change. And as you can see there, that's relatively straightforward. However, in a transformative change process, it's a deeper change, where also you intend to change the fundamental building blocks of the organizational culture, and not only on an organizational level, but you also intend to radically change the way people perceive, think, and behave at their workplace. And as you can imagine here, that this progress is not always as linear as you might hope, or as might be ideal. And it also is an iterative process, where you can move forward, but you also have to step backwards, and again, in this process, learn how this radical change can happen in the organization. Well, this is a theory from Gales, which is the multi-level perspective on sustainable change. And this is another way in which you can view this transformative change, where in the upper layer here, you see a macro level, or let's say a socio-technical landscape, in which universities are nested. So you can see that as the political domain, the rules and the policies of where an institution is nested in. Then on the meso level, you can look at that as the institution itself, and how the institution is a part of that bigger macro social technical landscape. And then on the micro level, you have the niche innovation. So the changes within the organization that drive institutional change, and that can even affect the social technical landscape. So it's, in a lot of ways, for an institution, for transformative change, it's looking at those micro and meso level and try to nurture those change and nurture those niche innovations into changing the institution as a whole. And how that then can look, or one of the ways in which you can look at that is here on a study by Monica Bravo-Granstrom. She did a study on, well, mostly in classrooms, and how there you have a same sort of multi-level perspective of how teachers' beliefs can influence teaching in learning in multi-languageal settings. And there, of course, there is a societal aspect of language learning, which is then on a macro level. On the institutional level, you have the institutional structures that are there, like the curricula and the syllabus. And then individual, that's way more, that's in the classroom itself. And also here you see they are not disconnected from each other. So the micro level, what happens in the classroom can have an effect on the curriculum or on the syllabus. And if you change the syllabus in some way, that can have an effect on the macro level, and vice versa. The central idea here is that you keep learning from those changes, and keep learning from the progression that you make. And if we then go to a fantastic research by Alexander Baker-Friesen, he analyzed how then this transformative change on those different levels, on a individual micro, and on an organizational meso, and then finally on an extra-organizational macro level, looking at different aspects of how the organization should change. So on a psychological level, on an organizational change management level, on a sustainability in higher education level, governance for sustainability level, and socio-ecological systems, and looking within each of these levels how or what kind of changes can be made. The difficulty, of course, then is, now that we know maybe in a broad sense what transformative change is, let me go to the next. So now that we know in a very broad sense what transformative change is and what constitutes of it, so there are many different models now of what transformative change can be, but it still leaves open the central question of, okay, how do you then really do something with that, and how do you really navigate those changes? So for me, there are many, let's say, follow-up research questions. So how can higher education institutions navigate transformative change towards sustainability? Also, if we look at this more deeper level, like what are then psychological drivers and barriers for transformative change? How do we change this mindset of people in an organization? And what are then effective interventions for transformative change at higher education institutions? And my, let's say, final question, or my main question to you would be, well, that can only happen if we can only discover these things if we learn that together. So I would very much like to work with you also, and like to connect so we can discuss these topics together, and discuss and navigate this sustainability and social responsibility in universities together. So thank you.
Thank you, Ivar. That's really very comprehensive presentation, and it's very interesting to see indeed all the complexity of this issue. Once again, indeed, if there are any questions, please post them on the side of the window. Also for other speakers, if you have questions. I have two questions, if I may. One is, in the previous presentation, we heard how, in fact, education and research account for only part of the narratives and the items, in that case, of how universities responded to COVID. Do you also measure something similar at your university, that in terms of social responsibility, education and research are only part of, and there are many other functions of the university that come into the forefront, like outreach, for instance?
Yes, on a, let's say, at our universities, well, first, or one of the other ways in which we try to map that is by by also looking in a broader sense what the impact of our research and education is. And we try to also, well, as in the previous presentation, we try to quantify that also in a certain way by also looking at indeed, so what is our effect on policy documents? What are our presentations in television programs or radio programs? So it's indeed also then broader. I believe actually a colleague of ours is now presenting in a different group on also mapping this. So if you're interested, go to also watch or rewatch that video. But indeed, I think it's way more broad, and especially at VU, where we really have this wider scope on what our impact on society is. Yeah, it is way broader than only education and research. But in the end, also, well, we are also part of this broader social technical system, where still, despite maybe having not necessarily less focus on it, we are still very much stimulated on those classical aspects of a university and to perform on that. Like still an academic career can still be quite classically motivated by publications. And yeah, I think also that needs a bigger shift in the overall system of universities.
Yes, exactly. I think that is the recognition of researchers needs also some updates, because if it is only based indeed or largely based on publications, of course we miss out a large part of society.
Yeah.
So well, that leads me to my second question, that actually was one of your final questions as well, indeed, in terms of the barriers. What are still indeed the main barriers that you see in terms of evolving the social responsibility of the university?
Well, so I think one of the now my cheeky escape will be that it depends very much on the different on the different situation. But I think like in any change management or in any change, like the standing regime or the standing operations has a tendency to a certain extent to maintain itself, and then resistance can be that well, maybe in our example or one example that I heard of in the past is that it can be that organizations have close ties, or universities have close ties in their research with the fossil fuel industry, for example, and that they are then highly dependent on that. And another example could be if researchers done research on classical economic models all their life, and now you ask them to change it and to look at maybe, oh, what is degrowth economics? What can be circular economics? And that is really, you need to bring people along with that. And the same goes with if researchers have deeper ties with fossil industries or industries that we should move away from or approach differently at least. Then it does require, yeah, this deeper reflection together to make that change. And that is difficult, and it takes time, because again, those are then deeply ingrained aspects of people and of institutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that actually is goes in the direction of a question that we received from the audience. Say sustainability research should be studied in the developing economies or developed countries, because most of the research is for developed countries. So do you have indeed something to add here? Are we still very much focused on developed countries, lacking indeed a thorough understanding of what this means in other regions and contexts in the world?
Well, so I think I can only speak from some of the research that I've seen within this transformative change paradigm. And then, well, what I think I've seen research from a lot of universities from all over the world, but less from African universities. So then you could argue, or at least definitely, there is indeed some bias in this field for transformative change, where you indeed see within that field, I guess, a slight bias towards more Western Western countries so far. But maybe I would discover something else in a year. But so far, I see a slight bias. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's also why networks are so important, because these are platforms indeed to share experience and to ensure indeed a more widespread understanding of these topics. Well, thank you so much, Ivar. It's been a pleasure to listen to your presentation. And thank you also to Muhammad for your comment. I think indeed that definitely raises a lot of good thoughts. Let's move on to the third presentation for today by Titilayo Olubunmi Olaposi. And the title is Collaborative Research in the 21st Century, Strengths and Challenges of Some Sub-Saharan African Universities.
Can I start now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. My name has been mentioned. I'm from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. I'm trying to control my slide, but it's as if it's not moving. Maybe I will have to go off from the full screen. Oh. I'm very sorry, I have technical issues here. I don't know. It's not moving. Please let me just start all over again to share. Please permit me to do it like this. It was not moving the other time. I'm very sorry. So the background to my study, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. In many sub-Saharan African universities, resources are scarce. Therefore, the ability to access international research funding is key. Actually, previously, researchers in Africa or in sub-Saharan African universities do work in silos. People keep their works private to themselves. They keep it secret. They don't want any other person to see it so that they will not steal it. But as it is in the world today, the reality is that if someone is going to do world-class research, that person should collaborate with others locally and internationally. Now, presently, project funding is highly competitive, and individual researchers have to develop themselves so that they can get those skills that are needed to put forward competitive proposals and carry out competitive research. This could not be done by individuals. It could be achieved when professionals, when researchers put their heads together, when they work together to produce proposals that will attract the funders, most of which are international in nature. Now, universities in Africa have to prepare themselves too, apart from the researchers preparing themselves. They have to provide facilities, they have to provide support and things like that, that will enable their researchers to perform well in the international community. Now, why this research? When I went into the literature, I realized that a lot of issues have been addressed like defining research collaboration, how to measure research collaboration, the factors that are influencing research collaboration, sources of collaboration, and the impact of collaboration. I realized that most times, individual researchers are the focus of research on collaboration. Universities have not been the focus of researchers. Therefore, I thought and I decided to carry out this research to find out if Sub-Saharan African universities are actually ready for this competition we are talking about, that will enable their researchers perform at their best. So this research aims to provide information that will enable universities see where they are weak, where they need to strengthen themselves, where they need to help their researchers, so that they will be able to compete well at the international forum. Now, the research methods. The study took the qualitative research methodology from the ARUA platform, African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA. There are 10 countries in that alliance. Out of the 10, I selected 5 for the research. And out of the 5, I selected two universities to represent a country. So making 10 participants for the study. The method I used was virtual focus group interview. I brought people that have experience in research administration from these universities. They are fellows of IREX. IREX is a US-based organization that provides support for universities administrators in Africa. So I purposely selected fellows of IREX because they are high-ranking professionals, researchers, and administrators that have experience in their universities. The research questions were 3. The first one, to what extent is your university involved in collaborative research? The second one, what factors enhance collaborative research in your institution? This question was to draw the strengths of the universities. And the third one, what factors impede collaborative research in your institution, so that the weaknesses could be highlighted. Now, from the study, the factors facilitating collaborative research. The first one was establishment of an office of sponsored research. It was found that some universities do not have an office dedicated to research management. Some have offices, but they are not actually doing what they are supposed to do. So the universities are supposed to have an office that will be dedicated to research management, so that they will provide the services that are needed by researchers, to be able to perform well in collaboration. The second one, provision of holistic research support services. This is what the Office of Research or Office of Research Management will be providing to researchers. When researchers are left on their own, they will not be able to perform well. And this is the situation we found in most of these universities that participated in the research. Then the third one is existence of a deputy vice chancellor for research and innovation. In most of the universities, they just have deputy vice chancellor academic. And that one is the one that will be responsible for everything research and academic. We found that the burden is too much on the DVC. there must be another DVC that will be in search of research and innovation. By that, the body will be lighter and the performance will be better. And the fourth factor is regular researchers' capacity building. In most African universities, we realized that researchers are trained during their master's and PhD degree programs. Thereafter, after their employment into the university as researchers, they hardly get training and retraining. Some that are very lucky get maybe like fellowship outside their country, so they are trained, but they are very, very few. The percentage is very, very low. So we realized that where we have capacity building, they are doing very well. So a factor that is facilitating collaborative research in the universities where collaborative research is doing well is because they have regular researchers' capacity building. Then we have clear university policy for sponsored research and universities' MOU with foreign institutions. So where universities have clear policies and the policies are well disseminated to the researchers and staff, the collaborative research is doing well in such universities. The key challenges that we found were inadequate infrastructure to support internationally acceptable research. In most universities, we have internet connectivity, but they are weak. Here, where I am, most times the internet connection is not reliable. So this one is impeding the work of the researchers, and it is a minus for ability to perform well on collaborative tables. So it is a key challenge: inadequate infrastructure, power, incessant power failure is a key challenge. Then number two, we have inadequate financial support for staff to attend international conferences. We realize that most staff most researchers that enter into collaboration with their colleagues in other universities, especially abroad outside of their country, they do so when they attend conferences outside the country. That is where we meet our colleagues, we take their address, we take their contacts, and from there, we begin to interact, and from there, we begin to collaborate. But when researchers do not have funding to attend such conferences, it becomes a problem. It is affecting collaborative research, and it is affecting the universities. Then number three is heavy researchers' workload. The issue of workload is a serious one because teaching and research are the two duties of researchers in our universities. The teaching workload is put on the younger researchers most times. And the younger researchers are the ones that actually need to go out to collaborate so that they can do research and impact people, impact society, impact their university, and get career advancement. But when the workload is heavy, it impedes collaborative research. Number four, lack of information on international best practices and funding opportunities. Most of these researchers in Sub-Saharan African universities do not get information, and when they get information, they do not get it on time. Maybe it's going to close in 2 days' time. What could they do? So this is a key challenge that universities need to address, to look for ways of providing information for researchers on international best practices and funding opportunities. The fifth one is weak systematic learning and adaptation procedures. Universities are supposed to learn from the activities of their researchers and take corrective measures where necessary. But from our interaction, we realize that this is lacking in most of our universities. And last but not the least, lack of incentives for researchers. When researchers do not get incentives, people tend to focus on personal gains rather than what will benefit the university or what will benefit the society. Researchers will not want to do more than what they are paid to do. For instance, we are talking about the third stream of activity, of research activity, in terms of IP exploitation. Most researchers in Sub-Saharan Africa do not even want to hear that because there are no incentives, no support. This challenge is a key one, and it is a serious one. So in conclusion, I would like to say that universities in the Sub-Saharan Africa should address the challenges and strengthen their strengths and put more efforts on their strengths so that the researchers could be supported adequately to perform well in international collaboration. Actually, from our discussion, we realized that there is collaboration at the local level. Researchers from within the same department, they collaborate with themselves, and researchers from different departments sometimes do collaborate. But international collaboration, that is where the problem is. And universities in Sub-Saharan Africa have to realize this and try to make adjustments. Thank you very much. That is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Titilayo. Thank you. What you describe is extremely useful, I think, to many universities, and the challenges you point out, I think, are shared by many institutions. Again, for all participants, please post your questions on in the chat box on the side of the screen. I have a question for you. In your research, did you identify some of the major imbalances when it comes to the lack or the difficulty of collaboration? What are there universities indeed that stand out positively or negatively in terms indeed of their what are the differences, basically the main differences when it comes to collaborative research across universities?
You mean when they are in collaboration, do they encounter difficulties? Is that the question?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Actually, it's outside the scope of this study, but you know, I am an IREX USP fellow myself, and we do interact on a platform. Now, from the interaction on that platform, I can say yes. You know, when researchers are not adequately trained and they get into collaboration, they will not be able to measure up to the standard of their partners. So most times they do things that are not up to standard, and you know, that can affect future collaboration with their university. And things that are very serious, like legal issues, could arise. For example, some of them have entered into collaboration before without knowing about the legal aspect of collaboration, like this material transfer agreements and those agreements that they are supposed to enter into before they begin to make some disclosures. Most of our researchers were not aware. They just entered the collaboration and they began to do things the way they know best to do. But we do not have any report of any legal case, actually, nothing so serious. But we realize that we need to be trained, that the researchers in Africa needs to be trained for international collaboration. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see, if there are no other questions, then I think we are right on time, because there is another session starting in just under 10 minutes. So thank you so much to the presenters. It's been indeed really fantastic, and we have also some congratulations from the audience as well for the insights that you brought to the session. So thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to all the attendees, and I look forward to seeing you at the next sessions. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you very much.